The world began not with an image, but with a sound, a deep mechanical thunk from within the belly of a machine, a sound that was once synonymous with anticipation, now just a relic. This was followed by the high-pitched, wavering whir of twin spools beginning their slow, deliberate spin, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very speakers, humming a song of forgotten technology. The screen was a void of the deepest black, a nothingness that lasted for a heartbeat, 2, 3, long enough to make one question if there was anything on the tape at all. Then it erupted, a supernova of chaotic, hissing static, a blizzard of black and white noise that screamed into the silence, a visual cacophony so intense it felt like it was scraping against the mind. The audio was a relentless, shapeless roar, the sound of a dead channel screaming into an empty room. This fury of noise and light held for a seemingly endless moment before it began to coalesce, to resolve, the chaotic particles of static pulling themselves into a shaky, unstable semblance of a picture. The first thing to appear, burned into the bottom right corner of the frame in a stark digital font that felt anachronistic against the analog decay, was the time code, 06-17-2004, a date, an anchor in the storm. The picture solidified, though solid was a generous term. The resolution was low, the colors were oversaturated to the point of bleeding, tinted with a warm, unnatural sepia tone as if the tape itself were aging in fast forward. The lighting was dim, the source a weak orange-tinted sunlight struggling to cut through the slats of a half-closed blind, casting long prison bar shadows across the room. The camera, a bulky 90s-era handheld camcorder, was clearly being operated by an amateur. Its movement was unsteady, nauseatingly so, as it panned slowly across a child's bedroom. Its focus hunted, blurring and then sharpening on details seemingly at random. It lingered on a cluttered desk, its surface a testament to youthful creativity and chaos. There were stacks of paper, notebooks with cartoon animal stickers on the covers, a scattered collection of crayons and markers, some with their caps missing. And there, standing like silent sentinels amidst the creative debris, were a few small, cute-looking vinyl figures, a smiling dinosaur, a round-bodied bear, characters from a forgotten era of innocence. A man's voice, soft and gentle, filtered through the tinny microphone, speaking from a point just behind the camera. He had a slight, melodic Japanese accent that softened his consonants. "Mari-chan, are you in here? I have something for you. Papa brought you back a surprise from his trip." The camera wobbled as he moved, the lens dipping towards the shag carpet before swinging back up. A little girl, no older than 6 or 7, came bouncing into the frame from the corner of the room. She was a blur of motion in yellow fabric, wearing a bright sundress adorned with little embroidered flowers. Her face, as was often the case in these intimate, home-recorded moments, was a frustrating smudge, a purposeful blurring by time or something else, but her sheer, unadulterated excitement was a tangible force. She clapped her hands together, a tiny, sharp sound picked up by the mic. "From the city? From the big city, Papa? Did you go to the Pop Mart?" she asked, her voice high and clear, each word bubbling with anticipation. She hopped from one foot to the other, unable to contain her energy. The man behind the camera chuckled, a warm, loving sound that was momentarily clear of the tape's inherent fuzz. "Yes, from the Pop Mart in Shibuya, the biggest one. I stood in a very long line for a very long time, just for you." A hand entered the frame from the bottom. It was a man's hand with kind lines on it, and it held a small, brightly colored cardboard box. The logo was unmistakable even through the film grain. Pop Mart, rendered in a cheerful modern font. The box was covered in vibrant, cartoonish artwork featuring a line of bizarre yet endearing creatures with oversized heads and wide, innocent eyes. One of them was prominently circled in what looked like shaky silver marker ink. It had pointed elf-like ears, a mischievous closed-eyed grin, and was clutching a tiny, grinning red devil figure. Beneath it, in both English and Japanese characters, was its name, Labubu. "You found him! You found the one with the tiny devil?" Mari squealed, her blurred face turning up towards the camera lens. "Kaito-chan at school said they were all sold out. She said I would never get him." "Well, Kaito-chan was wrong," her father said, his voice full of playful triumph. "Now, are you ready? Do you feel lucky?" Mari nodded vigorously, her small hands reaching out with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. She took the box from him, her fingers tracing the circled artwork. The tearing of the cardboard was a loud, crinkling roar on the audio track. She pulled out the sealed, opaque plastic shell inside, the blind box that held its secret hidden from view. With a sharp, satisfying crack, she popped it open. She gasped, a genuine, heartfelt sound of pure joy. "It's him! It's really him, Papa! It's Labubu, the one with the tiny devil!" She held the figure up to the camera, her small fingers trembling slightly. The camera zoomed in unsteadily, the lens focusing with a soft whirring sound. The figure was about 2 inches tall, a perfect glossy vinyl sculpture. A white, imp-like creature with sharp-pointed black ears that looked almost like horns. Its eyes were simple black dots, but they were shaped in a way that suggested mischievous intelligence. Its mouth was a small black line that curved up into a knowing, sharp-toothed smile. In its arms it clutched a much smaller, red demon figure with its own tiny, malevolent grin. It was undeniably cute, a masterpiece of playful design, but there was something about its expression, a subtle asymmetry to its smile, or perhaps the way the light caught the glossy black of its eyes that held a faint, unsettling charge. The camera lingered on it for a moment, too long, as Mari celebrated. The shot held, the figure centered in the frame. The audio, for just a second, distorted. The happy sounds of the room seemed to pull away, and a low, sub-auditory hum bled into the recording, a dissonant frequency that felt like it was vibrating from somewhere deep within the tape itself. It was the sound of a television tuned to a dead channel in another room, a sound that was there and then gone, so quickly it could be dismissed as imagination. "He's your new friend, okay?" her father said, his voice returning to normal, though perhaps a hair less certain than before. "You have to promise to take very good care of him." "I will, I promise. Thank you, Papa." Mari clutched the figure to her chest for a moment before turning and carefully, deliberately placing it on her white-painted nightstand, right next to a small ceramic lamp shaped like a mushroom. She positioned it so it was facing the room. The camera lingered on this final composition, the cute, impish figure standing sentinel beside the soft glow of the lamp. The shot held a second too long, the silence stretching just past the point of comfort. The father seemed to be waiting for something, or perhaps he was just admiring the scene. In that prolonged silence, the viewer could study the details of the room reflected in the glossy surface of the figure's eyes, a distorted, curved version of the window, the blinds, the camera itself. For a fraction of a second, the reflection seemed to move independently. The audio crackled, a single pop of static. Then the video cut to black, not with the gentle fade of someone pressing stop, but with the jarring, abrupt finality of a guillotine blade. The tape hissed and sputtered back to life, the screen resolving from the inky blackness into a new, unsettling tableau. The time code, a stark digital scar on the visual field, now read 06-23-2004. 6 days had passed. The quality had noticeably degraded, as if the tape had been played and replayed to the point of exhaustion. A persistent dancing film grain blanketed everything, a blizzard of white noise that made the image seem alive and crawling. The colors were wrong, all of them shifted into a sickly, jaundiced spectrum of yellows and browns, leaching the warmth and life from the room. The camera was no longer in the hands of an excited father. It was now mounted on a tripod, its gaze fixed and unblinking, a cold, mechanical witness. It was aimed squarely at Mari's bed, where the small shape of the girl lay asleep under a comforter patterned with cartoon stars. The room was submerged in darkness, the only illumination coming from a small nightlight plugged into the wall socket, its plastic shell shaped like a five-pointed star that cast weak, pathetic rays that seemed to create more shadows than they banished. And there, on the nightstand, standing just at the edge of the nightlight's feeble glow, was the Labubu figure. It was a stark white silhouette against the gloom, its details swallowed by the low light and the tape's decay, but its presence was a focal point, a malevolent lodestone. The audio was a study in tension. At first, there was only the sound of Mari's soft, rhythmic breathing, a gentle susurration that should have been calming, but instead felt like a countdown. Underneath it, almost subliminally, was the constant low hum of the tape itself, a drone that was slowly, inexorably getting louder. Then, a new sound emerged. It was faint at first, a distant, tinkling melody that seemed to be filtering in from another room, or perhaps from between the walls. It was a music box, but there was something deeply wrong with it. The melody was a simple, looping nursery rhyme, something akin to "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," but several of the notes were discordant, broken, and out of tune. It was a hollow, ghostly rendition, playing the same corrupted loop over and over, a sound that spoke of something fractured and mocking. As the melody played, the camera, with a mind of its own, decided to refocus. With a soft whirring sound, the lens adjusted itself. Mari's sleeping form blurred into softness, becoming an indistinct lump, while the Labubu figure on the nightstand snapped into razor-sharp clarity. It was in this moment of perfect focus that it happened. A single frozen frame, a glitch in the magnetic tape, a hiccup in reality. For 1/24th of a second, the figure was not in its original benign pose. Its head was turned, its painted black eyes no longer looking out into the room, but staring directly, intently at the sleeping girl. Its tiny sculpted smile seemed wider, crueler, the tiny teeth now looking less like plastic and more like sharp bone needles. Then the glitch passed, and the frame snapped back to the normal, inanimate toy. The discordant music box melody ceased abruptly, leaving a silence that was somehow more deafening than the noise. Into this void, a whisper erupted. It was impossibly close, as if the speaker's lips were pressed directly against the camera's microphone. It was a child's voice, Mari's voice, but it was layered with a phlegmatic, staticky rasp, something ancient and electronic speaking through her. "New friend," it breathed, the words slithering out of the speakers. On the bed, Mari stirred. She mumbled in her sleep, her voice her own again, but thick with a somnambulistic dread. "Labubu wants to play in the dark," she murmured, before turning over. The video didn't linger. It cut with a jarring, aggressive snap to a new scene, daylight again, but the sickly yellow tint remained, making the sunny room look diseased. Mari was sitting on the floor amidst a nest of crayons and paper, drawing intently. She held up a picture for the camera. It was a crayon drawing of herself, a stick figure in a yellow dress, holding hands with a much larger, dominating figure she had labeled Labubu. But this Labubu was monstrous, its mouth a scribbled, violent mess of black and red crayon that bled outside the lines. All around them, in every available corner of the paper, were dozens of tiny, identical red devils, their grins uniform and sinister. Her father's voice came from behind the camera, but it was different now, strained, tired, stripped of its former warmth. It was the voice of a man who hadn't slept, who was trying desperately to cling to normalcy. "That's nice, honey. Very creative. Who are all the little red guys?" Mari's blurred face turned slowly toward the camera lens, her head tilted, not with childish curiosity, but with a sharp avian jerk that was profoundly unnatural. Her voice, when it came, was flat and devoid of its usual cadence. "They're his friends. They're coming out of the box. He says there are more. He says they're hungry." The audio then distorted violently, screeching into a wave of digital noise that sounded like a scream, completely overwhelming the image and swallowing it whole in a sea of blinding white static before everything cut to black. The tape did not so much begin as it violently intruded upon the silence, exploding into being with a scream of distorted audio and a scream consumed by a frantic, boiling static. This was no mere preview of decay. This was the artifact in its death throes. The time code in the corner, 0704-2004, flickered erratically, digits stuttering and glitching as if fighting to exist, a desperate anchor in a sea of visual chaos. The image itself was a nightmare of analog decay, flickering and jumping with jarring cuts that felt less like editing and more like a seizure of reality itself. Rolling horizontal lines of interference tore through the frame, and a constant shimmering rain of magnetic snow rendered every detail into a vague, nauseating impression. The colors had bled out entirely, leaving a world of sickly greens and oppressive blacks, the palette of a corpse seen through a night vision lens. The audio was a relentless low buzz, a swarm of angry insects trapped within the speakers, underneath which lay the muffled, frantic sounds of the real world as if heard from the bottom of a well. The camera was moving, not with the joyful wobble of before, but with the panicked, jerky motions of a man running, the lens swinging wildly, capturing blurred glimpses of a hallway wall, a door frame, the ceiling. The father's breathing was the dominant sound, a ragged, wet gasp that hitched with pure terror, each inhalation a struggle. "Mari, answer me! Where are you? This isn't funny anymore, baby, please!" His voice pleaded, cracking under the strain, the words swallowed by the distorting buzz. The camera swung around a corner, and the viewer was given a dizzying, fragmented view of the little girl's bedroom door, now marred by deep, parallel scratches that gouged the white paint down to the bare wood beneath. He shoved the door open, the camera lurching forward to reveal the interior. The room was a war zone. Toys were not just scattered, but eviscerated. Plush animals torn open, their stuffing strewn about like innards, plastic cars shattered against the walls, and the walls themselves, they were a canvas of madness. They were covered every inch in crayon drawings, but these were not the simple creations of a child. They were obsessive, horrifying chronicle. Every drawing depicted the same thing, a monstrous, towering Labubu, its form now elongated and skeletal, its grin a cavernous black hole filled with jagged lines. And surrounding it, in a crawling, seething multitude, were hundreds, thousands of the tiny red devils, a swarm of identical, grinning fiends that covered the clouds on the wallpaper, the furniture, the windows. The nightstand was empty. The ceramic mushroom lamp lay on its side, shattered. The father's breath caught in his throat, a sound of pure despair. "No, no, no, no!" The camera whirled around, a dizzying spin, and a child's laughter echoed from down the hall. It was Mari's laugh, but it was wrong, horribly wrong. It was syncopated, hiccuping, missing its natural rhythm, and replaced with the same broken, discordant cadence of the music box melody from the previous tape. It was a mockery of joy, a sound that promised only terror. The father ran, the camera becoming a nauseating blur of motion, jostling violently as he stumbled down the hall toward the living room. The laughter grew louder, mingling with the oppressive buzz of the tape. He burst into the living room. The television was on, its massive, curved glass screen displaying nothing but a blazing, roaring wall of blinding white static, the source of the room's ghastly, flickering light. And there, sitting on the floor, cross-legged, directly in front of the pulsating screen, was Mari. Her back was to the camera, a small, dark silhouette against the overwhelming light. She was perfectly, unnaturally still, her head illuminated by the static glow. "Mari? Mari, are you okay? Talk to Papa," he whispered, his voice trembling so badly the words were barely intelligible. He took a slow, cautious step forward, then another. The camera lens focused unsteadily, the mechanism whirring as it tried to lock onto her. The sound from the TV seemed to grow louder, consuming all other audio, a deafening roar that felt like it was vibrating the very bones of the viewer. He was close now, his shadow falling over her. He reached out a shaking hand, and then Mari's head snapped around. It did not turn. It rotated a full 180 degrees on her neck to look at him, a movement of impossible biomechanical horror. Her face was not blurred. The digital obscurity that had protected the viewer was gone, leaving the full, awful truth exposed. Her eyes were gone. In their place were two dark, empty holes that seemed to drill into the soul. Her mouth was stretched into a wide, impossibly large grin that split her cheeks, a perfect, horrific mimicry of the Labubu smile, and it was filled with rows of tiny, needle-like teeth. She spoke, and her voice was a terrifying chorus of her own sweet tone layered with the same staticky, ancient whisper from the night. "We're playing. We opened all the boxes." The father screamed, a raw, primal sound of utter devastation. The camera dropped from his hands, hitting the carpet with a dull thud, landing at a low angle that showed the scene from the floor. The view was partially obscured, but it showed the shadows on the wall cast by the TV's static light. Mari's shadow was not alone. It was large, horned, and monstrous, and it was surrounded by a crawling, shifting mass of dozens of smaller, fiendish shadows with tails and tiny horns, a swarm of them climbing the walls, moving independently of anything in the room. The tape glitched violently, showing a rapid-fire subliminal montage of hellish imagery, an extreme close-up of the Labubu figure, now seen in the foreground of every previous shot, its head always turned toward the camera, watching. The Pop Mart blind box, its cardboard torn and wet with something dark. The father's utterly broken, tear-streaked face reflected in the static of the TV, and the single, clear, nightmare frame of a monstrous, fleshy Labubu, its white skin glistening and wet, its eyes deep black pits, reaching a long clawed hand directly toward the lens. The screen then dissolved entirely, utterly consumed by a blinding, screaming white static that offered no mercy. There was no transition. The silence that followed the screaming static was absolute, a void of sound so complete it felt like a physical pressure on the eardrums. Then, the screen flickered back into existence, but it was no longer a window into a room, it was a burning, ophthalmic pain. This was the final, terminal stage of the tape's decay. The image was almost entirely consumed by a raging, boiling static, a storm of white and black noise that churned and convulsed without rhythm or reason. What little visual information remained was shredded, glimpsed only in fleeting nightmare flashes between the violent pulses of corruption. The time code was gone, replaced by a single, flashing, frantic word that burned a migraine-inducing strobe into the center of the screen. Error, error, error. The audio was no longer a buzz or a hum. It was a singular, piercing, high-frequency tone, a sonic ice pick drilling into the brain, punctuated by random, jarring blasts of distorted white noise that sounded like screams from a ruptured loudspeaker. This was not a recording. This was the death rattle of a medium, the captured essence of a breakdown that was both technological and spiritual. A shape began to fight its way through the visual chaos, a darker patch in the storm of white noise. The camera's perspective, what was left of it, was still low on the living room floor, pointing at the roaring static of the television screen. The shape and the static coalesced, resolved for a single gut-wrenching second into the face of Mari. Her hollow-eyed, grinning visage stared out from the TV, not as a reflection, but as something within the signal itself. Her mouth opened and closed in a silent, monstrous pantomime of speech, uttering words that were swallowed by the screeching tone. But this image was quickly, violently overwritten. A different form pushed its way out of the noise, a thing of impossible substance made from pure signal. It was Labubu. It was not a toy, not a drawing, not a shadow. It was real. Its form was a grotesque interpretation of the vinyl figure, its white skin glistening with a wet, oily sheen under the static light, looking less like plastic and more like pallid, diseased flesh. Its black eyes were no longer painted dots, but deep, empty pits that seemed to swallow the light around them, pools of absolute void. Its smile was a jagged, torn gash filled with a darkness that dripped like crude oil. The tiny red devil no longer rested in its arms. It now clung to its shoulder, a chittering, twitching familiar, its own minuscule face contorted in a silent screech. The creature took a step. Its movement was the most horrifying thing yet. It did not move with the fluidity of a living thing, but with the jerky, stuttering, stop-motion cadence of a film strip skipping frames. It advanced through the static of the television screen, not as an image, but as a thing, its form phasing through the glass of the CRT, as if it were stepping through a curtain of water. It was in the room. The camera on the floor, its dying lens, captured the monstrous gangly legs as they touched the carpet, the static of the TV bleeding off its form like steam. It took another stumbling, jerky step toward the fallen camera. The perspective from the floor made it loom impossibly tall, a monstrous giant filling the world. Each step was accompanied by a sound that cut through the high-frequency tone. A wet, tearing sound, like Velcro being pulled apart from wet meat, synced with its stuttering motion. It leaned down, its movements a series of rapid freeze-frame snapshots, until its grotesque face filled the entire frame, its void-like eyes becoming twin tunnels into nothingness, its terrible grin the only thing that existed in the universe. The screeching audio suddenly cut out. The static on the screen vanished. For 1 second, there was perfect, pristine blackness and a silence so profound it was louder than any noise. In that absolute void, a sound emerged. It was clear, intimate, and chillingly close, a childlike whisper that seemed to come from directly behind the viewer, spoken right into their ear. It was the last thing on the tape, the final data point before the end. It was a statement of fact, a promise. I'm here. The screen did not cut to black. In the final millisecond, the creature's mouth opened wide, wider than any physical possibility, a black, expanding void that contained not teeth, not a tongue, but an infinite, screaming emptiness that rushed forward to consume the lens, the camera, the room, and everything beyond. Then, and only then, did the tape end. The screen went dead. The silence that remained was the silence of a presence left behind in the room where it was watched. It was the silence of something waiting for you to turn around.